So Philip, you first went to California while you were researching for Farmageddon. Can you tell me why you went there and what you found out?
Well, I teamed up with a national newspaper journalist, Isabel Oakeshott of the Sunday Times. She came to the subject new, which I saw as a good thing. She also came to the subject as someone who works in high-level circles, talking to ministers week in, week out as during her job as political editor, but also comes to it as a mother of now 3 children. I'm keen to know what the best food is. And I wanted to find one trip that would encapsulate the reasons why industrial agriculture is such a concern. So we went to California. Of course, she was excited at the idea of, as so many people are, going to California, dipped in gold, Hollywood, all of those things. When we got to Central Valley, where there are so many dairies and so much crop production, she was able to see what I was getting at. We stood amongst vast groves of crops, almonds, fruit, every type of crop. And the almond trees were arranged in perfect rows. And as we stood there, do you know what we heard? Nothing. Not the chirp of a bird, not the buzz of a bee or the flutter of a butterfly. After a while, what we heard was the low thud of a helicopter in the distance. It was an aerial crop sprayer, spraying the crops with pesticides, and it was part of a daily chemical assault on the countryside, from the air, from terrestrial vehicles, from people in protective clothing. We also went up in a small plane and we looked down on this scenescape from the air, and what we saw were massive patchwork quilt squares of crops interspersed by what looked like vicious scars on the landscape. Those were the mega dairies, where thousands of cows were crowded on muddy paddocks, not a blade of grass in sight. It was insanity. There's so much space there. There's no reason for the cows to be concentrated like that. The wildlife has gone. The crops are vast. The dairy cows are on muddy paddocks. That, to me, is a vision of what some people see as the future of farming, this hyper-industrial farming. And when we got back to the airport after a few days in that environment, my co-author turned to me and she said to me, "I get it."
And then you next flew down to Argentina. Why did you go there? What's that got to do with factory farming?
Well, you know, the thing is, when you take animals off of the land, cows off of pasture, then their feed has to be grown elsewhere and taken to them. And on the industrial farm, that often means that the feed that's being grown for them is intensively grown cereals or soya. Argentina just happens to be the biggest exporter of soya on the planet, most of it GM. And when we got to Argentina, picture the scene. It was a beautiful South American sunset, and underneath that were dancing gauchos, South American cowboys with their berets and their boots, lassos swinging above their heads, catching calves, bringing them down. A scene that should be played out on the vast and wonderful pasture lands, the prairies out there. But what we found was that was happening on a feedlot with 4,000 cattle, crowded again without a blade of grass. Why? Because the rich grasslands of Argentina are being ploughed up to make way for GM soya, for export to factory farmed animals in Europe and China. Instead, the Argentinian cattle are put in these battery beef lots, if you like, and fed local corn. And
one of your last trips was to Peru. What's the story there?
Well, one thing I didn't realise was that so much fish is fed to factory farmed animals. When we got to Peru, we found that millions of tonnes of fish, Peruvian anchovies, are scooped up out of the rich Pacific Ocean, ground down into what they call fish meal, and exported again to factory farmed animals in Europe and in China. What that does is cause absolute devastation to what was once rich wildlife out there. What was so disturbing to me was that we went out on a boat to Asia Island, one of what they call the Guano Islands on the Pacific coast of Peru. These are seabird islands that have previously been so rich in bird life that the seabird muck can be up to 90 metres deep. It used to be one of Peru's biggest exports. They used to have teams of people on those islands digging that muck, putting it into sacks and exporting it as organic fertiliser to the fields of Queen Victoria, actually, and other European countries. So there's been a long history of exports in this way. But now, because those anchovies, because those fish are the food of the seabirds that deliver the muck to the Guano Islands, the fish are being scooped out at on such a vast scale. When we got to one of these Guano Islands, fable has it that in years gone by, if you stepped onto that island, the sky would turn black. Such would be the weight of birds. When we got to that island, as part of the Farmageddon tour, I was shocked is too gentler a word, to see that the birds barely formed a tide line ring around the base of the island. 95% of them have gone. Their food shipped out to factory farmed animals in Europe.